Hello, my name is Jacob Stolworthy, and this is Go to Bat, a brand new series shining a light on the hidden gems that deserve more love. Joining me for episode 1, we have a man of many talents, an actor, producer, writer, director, who appears in the new TV series, Boiling Point.
Right, check on table 8, 1 scout, 2 cod, 1 pour.
Ray Panthaki, welcome.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Really good.
Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Boiling Point, you played Freeman in the film.
Yeah.
Now that film took on a life of its own, I think it's fair to say. At what point did you kind of get the sense that it was going to be revisited in a TV series?
We didn't. I think when you sort of take on something like this, an indie film project, you sort of, there's a kind of an expectation that you're doing it for the love of what you do and the art, and there's a strong possibility that no one will see it. Of course, this was slightly different because Stephen Graham, and you know, he has a huge fan base, and rightly so, because he's the most incredible actor. But I don't think anyone was prepared for sort of how stratospheric it kind of went. And when I say that, I mean like with the public, that was one thing, and with the hospitality industry was another, but also critically, and you know, amongst our peers, and when it came to sort of award season, it got recognised, and I don't think anyone was kind of prepared for that. And it's great because I think the film, not only does it touch on important social issues, it's also incredibly experimental as a piece of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud that, you know, a piece of art like that sort of broke through into the mainstream.
What table is it?
7.
Let me go. Leave it. Go on, just fry the out and just grill the. That's how we're supposed to be cooked.
With the TV series, which is on BBC iPlayer now,
Yeah.
and is airing every Sunday, you return as Freeman. You're sous chef now in the series, which is, you know, you're getting stuck in, basically. You're doing all the, you know, all the intricacies and all the
blagging.
All the blagging.
We're blagging it.
So, like, obviously, the first, I think it's fair to say, it's not spoiled, the first 10 minutes kind of emulates the one take, spirit of the film. Did you kind of have a bit of PTSD when you were back in it and action was called, but now you're like kind of throwing around more technical jargon than you were before as a sous chef? Was it a bit like, oh God, I've got to get back into this?
Yeah, there was an air of, we did the film, that was, you know, an intense experience. And then you sort of do these things, you're really in it for that period of time, and then you go, I'm letting that go.
Yeah.
And you forget about it. And so it's done. Mm. And then so when it was like up again, you kind of go, first of all, you're like, should we really be revisiting something that was so successful? Mm-hmm. And secondly, I don't know if I can get my head into that space again. But you do it. And I think it was right to do the TV series, and the reason, although it was daunting because you're like, we don't want to touch something that isn't broken, but one of the things that the public really responded to was, and what I thought was really smart about the film, was that you touch on all these different lives, but you don't go too far into it, but yet the film was so smart that actually you don't feel dissatisfied with what you saw. You just saw elements of these lives. And it was right to people. There was an interest in these characters, so it was right to expand it more and go into their lives. But yeah, to answer your question, it was scary. And then when they decided to do the opening shot as a one-up,
yeah, what was your reaction?
Like, well, I think the new cast were like, "Whoa, we've not done this before," and we're like, "This is old hat. It's fine. It's fine."
One take old hat.
Yeah, exactly. We're used to this, but. The thing is, it was our rule on the film was, whatever happens, just keep going.
Yeah.
I think there was we came to the decision that, you know, unless someone's chopped their finger off and it's hanging off, we continue.
Yeah.
And we basically use anything that happens, we just use and we go with it. Mm. But yeah, it was scary the second time round because you're like, we did it so well the first time. Should we do it again? Yeah.
It's because some of these give a
You've been in the industry for a while now, actor, director, producer, writer.
Yeah.
You've kind of done it all. And I'm sure over the years you've starred in things that have, you know, like Boiling Point, kind of hit the hearts of the culture. But I'm sure there's other things that haven't, or not in the way that you might have hoped.
Yeah.
Now, this series is shining a light on such credits from people's back catalogues. And I'm just really intrigued to know which projects from your past you're going to bat for today?
I think it's really important to talk about it, but it was a film that I wrote, directed and produced, a short film called Life Sentence, which was essentially touching on knife crime and the epidemic of knife crime in the UK.
Talk to me about the just the conception of it and what inspired it, and a bit about the making of it.
Unfortunately, I lost someone close to me to a knife attack. It was around 2008 when, I don't know if you remember, but there was a spate of these knife attacks happening in London, and it just seemed to, the more the press spoke about it, it just seemed to be progressively getting worse. And unfortunately, I lost someone close to me, and I was very angry, and it was a completely unprovoked attack. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I just decided to write something. And I remember just sitting up one night and just scribbling away and writing this thing. And there was something I really specifically wanted to say, because I watched the family of the person that we'd lost sort of really fall apart, and how one moment had this ripple effect amongst all of them. And so that was something that I wanted to really talk about, because there was loads going on the TV and the news. People were marching on the streets and, you know, save lives and no knives and all this kind of stuff. And but I was just like, but what about the family? What about the family?
Who are them boys outside?
Oh, that's just Jason and his cousin and his mates.
They look older.
Yeah. They're my mates though.
And so I wrote this thing one night, and I remember just like by the end of it, I was like shaking, I'd like done it. And it was very therapeutic. I felt like I'd done something. I channeled my anger in some way. And then I went out and thought, let's see, shelved it for a bit, and then finally I felt ready, like, let's see if we can go and get this made. So I went around town and, you know, to see if I could raise £10,000 to try and shoot this short film, and there was no interest really. And then I thought, well, let's try some brands, because maybe they want to align with something charitable. And there were people interested, but then brands basically shied away from it because they felt like they didn't want to be seen to be jumping on a bandwagon of something that, you know, was terrible and something that was going on. And I was kind of like, no, you're really supporting something that needs to get out there. But I guess PR and marketing teams were a bit scared of it. And so I eventually just came to the conclusion that I have to shelve this thing. So I shelved it. And then maybe a few years later, a friend of mine who's a producer said to me, if I give you money to make this film, can you do it in time for this knife crime exhibition that was taking place? And I'm like, that's taking place in 2.5 weeks. Wow. And he's like, yeah, I want to screen it there, because there were politicians that were turning up. Can you get it done in that time? And I was like, I've never directed before. And he's like, there's £8,000. If you can do it, the money's yours. And again, I had to give myself a sort of talking to, and I was like, okay, Ray, you've never directed before, but you love storytelling. You've always wanted to do this. It's a personal story. You need to tell it. Once we'd got the money for the film, and I was thinking creatively about it, and we'd cast it, and I was thinking creatively about how I'm going to do this, and all this is in a short space of time, remember?
Yeah.
Remember we had £8,000 and 5 days to shoot it in. And so I was meeting with cinematographers, because I had all these really incredible and ambitious ideas of how I wanted to do it. So we're meeting all these cinematographers, and they were like, yeah, you haven't great ideas, but you haven't got enough time or money to execute it. And so I'd meet more, and they'd all say the same thing. And I was just like, man, everyone's being a naysayer. I think it's possible. But they were like, yeah, great ideas, not enough time or money. Sorry, can't do this. And then the producer that had given me the money said to me, all right, Ray, look, if you could have any cinematographer in the world, who would it be? And I went, it'd have to be Pierre Aim, who shot my favorite movie, La Haine. And so he's like, all right. And I'm like, okay. And then a day or two later, he comes to me and goes, I've got Pierre on the phone. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he wants to talk to you about this movie. He was just a dream and a joy to work with. I'm very fond of that man, and I'm very grateful to him for believing in me. I kind of try and believe that, you know, if things don't work out, that it really wasn't the right time. But then having said that, we wouldn't really be here talking if it, you know, it didn't have its moment, in a sense.
Yeah.
So maybe it was the right time for me in my own growth to make it. But actually, I don't think it was really the right time to release it. But I don't know what circumstances causes that.
Yeah,
you know,
there's no rhyme or
timing.
reason,
There
I'm
isn't.
sure. So,
There
but
isn't.
the film, I mean, the film did receive acclaim upon release, and it was your directorial debut. So how did you find, kind of as a directorial accomplishment, how do you find it looking back at Life Sentence now?
Yeah, I'm really, like, to think it's the first thing I'd ever done. I mean, and if I'm completely honest, I sort of stepped on set for the first time as a director, and in a weird way, I felt it came more naturally to me than acting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Because it was all quick, fast, and obviously I thought about it a long time because it had been in my head for a long time. But in terms of having no preparation, really, I felt it just came naturally to me as an actor. I like to put the work in, you know, and prepare. Whereas with this, I felt like after the experience, you can give me a scene and a group of people in a moment, and I think I have the ability with no prep to make it work. And acting is my number one love, of course. But it was a personal story, and I needed to be the one that told it, nobody else.
And do you kind of, in terms of obviously looking back and appraising it now, and you don't think it kind of got maybe the eyes on it should have at the time, did you take were there any other measures you kind of took to try and kind of get the release, you know, broadened, more eyes on it at the time?
Yeah, I did, and I was really passionate about getting this screened in schools. I had this idea that this should get screened at every school in the country, if possible, because I knew it was affecting people that were watching it. And so I wrote to Boris Johnson, who was Mayor of London at the time, and just said, look, I've made this film, and I got a thanks but no thanks letter back at the time. The reasoning was that they are doing their own campaigns on knife crime, which arguably I don't know if they were successful or not. But yeah, so it didn't really have the journey that I wanted it to have, that dream that I had of every school kid should watch this movie. But I continued as much as I physically could to go into schools and do it off my own back. But back then it was, you know, I was running a tiny production company from my back bedroom trying to do everything. I
mean, it's commendable, and the film is great, and I think it's one of those things, isn't it? I think it will come to them when it comes to them.
Yeah.
And I can see why you've picked it today.
Yeah, thank you.
But there's another thing we want to briefly talk about today, which I have watched since talking about what we're going to talk about, and it's great. Can you tell us what it is?
So this film is a film called Convenience, which was released in 2015?
Yeah, that's right.
2015. And again, this is a film that is a feature film that I produced and curated. I was frustrated with the sort of roles that I was being offered and what was out there. And I just decided, like, I'm never going to be seen as a leading actor in the roles that I want to play. I realized early on in my career that I had to start creating stuff because I was going up for stereotypical roles of you know, a brown actor. And was I ever gonna have the opportunity to be a leading actor? I knew what I had in me, I knew what I wanted to give, and I knew the performances and the stories I wanted to tell, and they just seemed to be, you know, getting cast as the same thing. And I thought, I'm going to just try and break some ground, and if the industry's not coming to me with the stuff I want to play, well, let me take something to them.
Do you think it's a bit suspicious, us working there?
What, two Asians working in an all-night garage?
At the time, I think it was too groundbreaking in the sense that there was two brown guys in leading roles not defined by their race.
Yeah.
And so when we came to sell it, a lot of distributors were like,
well, they just didn't know what to do.
yeah, we don't know how to market
bizarre,
this
isn't it?
because it's not Bend It Like Beckham or East is East. And I'm like, yeah, this is more like Clerks, Kevin Smith's Clerks. It's an indie comedy, but we don't have to talk about their race. It's just funny.
Irrespective, yeah.
And I think people at the time, even then in 2015, you know, just didn't know how to market something that didn't have stereotypical scenes. I've always believed that there will be a world in which people suddenly go, oh, you know what?
That?
For a film that was made for 80 grand,
Yeah.
that's a really wonderful piece of work.
You having a good day?
I've had better.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Ray.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you, man.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you
you.
so much.